He woke up to a soft humming sound. The room around him glowed with pale blue lights. The walls were smooth. The air smelled like metal and strange flowers. He sat up slowly, his head heavy, his chest aching. Everything felt too clean, too quiet, too alien. He blinked, trying to remember what had happened. One moment he was in his escape pod, spinning through space. The next, nothing. Now he was here, in a room that didn't look human at all. And then he saw her. She stood near the door, tall and calm. Her skin was pale lavender, eyes silver and glowing faintly. Her hair was tied back in tight braids. And she wore a uniform that shimmered like water. She was beautiful. But there was something dangerous in her smile. Finally awake, she said, voice smooth but playful, "You're not supposed to be here, human." He stared at her, confused. Where am I?" he asked, his voice dry. The alien woman tilted her head and walked closer. "You're on the starship Alexia property of the Royal Navari Fleet," she said. "You were drifting near our patrol zone, barely alive." He tried to stand, but pain shot through his leg. She moved fast, placing a hand on his shoulder, gently pushing him back down. "Don't move too much," she said. "You're still healing. Why did you save me?" he asked, looking into her glowing eyes. Her smirk returned, sharper now. "I didn't," she said. "I found you and I claimed you." His heart skipped. Claimed. He repeated, unsure what she meant. The woman didn't explain. Instead, she walked over to a screen on the wall and tapped it. The lights dimmed. The door sealed shut with a soft hiss. She turned back to him, her silver eyes never blinking. "There's no one else on this deck right now," she said. "It's just the two of us." He didn't like the way she said that. Not angry, but not safe either. "I want to speak to your captain," he said, trying to sound firm. "I need to contact Earth." She laughed softly. "There is no captain here right now," she replied. "And your Earth?" "It's far, very far." He looked around again, now more carefully. No windows, no signs, nothing familiar. Just him and her. Locked in a room on a ship he'd never heard of. "My name is Kale," he said slowly. "Flight engineer, United Earth." "Forces, I know," she said. "We scanned your pod." She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You're lucky I found you before the others." Kale frowned. "What do you mean?" "The other officers wouldn't have been gentle," she said. "To them, a human drifting alone is either a spy or a prize." His chest tightened. "So, what am I to you?" She walked back toward him, slowly. "To me," she said, smiling again. "You're my project." He didn't like that word. "What do you plan to do with me?" he asked, voice shaking a bit. She reached out and gently touched the side of his face. "You'll find out," she whispered. "But for now, rest." "I don't trust you," he said quietly. Her smile faded just a little. "Good," she said. "You shouldn't." She turned and walked toward a small table in the corner. Pressed a button, and a tray slid out with food. Alien food, purple and green cubes, steaming with strange smells. "You'll need your strength," she said, placing the tray beside him. "This ship moves fast, and so do I." Kale looked at the food, then at her. "I don't even know your name," he said. She paused, looking over her shoulder. "Riven?" she said at last. "Navigator of Alexia, and now your guardian, more or less." He didn't know what that meant, but he knew this: he was in danger. She wasn't telling him everything. Maybe she had saved his life, or maybe she had other plans. He picked up one of the cubes and sniffed it. Riven watched him closely, like a scientist watching an experiment, or a cat watching a mouse, as he tasted the strange food. She moved to the door again. It hissed open, and she stepped halfway out. Then she turned back, eyes glinting with something he couldn't read. "Sleep tight, human," she said with a smirk. "Tomorrow we begin." Door closed behind her, leaving him alone, in silence, in fear, and with too many questions. Whatever this place was. Whatever Riven wanted, it had only just begun. Kale waited until the hallway was silent. He hadn't moved for hours, listening, watching the door's edge. Riven hadn't returned, and maybe this was his only chance. His muscles ached, but fear pushed him forward. He limped to the door and pressed his hand against the glowing panel. To his surprise, it opened with a quiet hiss. He stepped into the corridor, the lights dim and the air cooler. The ship felt alive, like it was breathing gently around him. There were no windows, just smooth walls with pulsing lights. He didn't know where he was going, but anything was better than being her project. He passed a hallway that curved sharply, then another. Everything looked the same, cold, sleek, alien. Suddenly, the lights shifted from blue to red. A soft voice echoed from somewhere above. Unauthorized movement detected. Kale froze, panic rising in his chest. He turned back, ready to sprint. But something appeared ahead. A thin blue wall of energy slid into place. Humming gently, he spun the other way. But another energy wall sealed that path too. He was trapped. Then he heard the soft footsteps. Slow, deliberate, Riven stepped into view. Her arms behind her back, eyes glowing calmly. "You didn't last long," she said, voice almost amused. 3 hours and you already tried to run." Kale glared at her, breathing hard. "I don't trust you," he said. "I don't want to be locked up like some animal." She walked closer. Slowly. "You're not an animal," she said. "But this ship isn't yours to wander. You're still a guest." "I didn't ask to be your guest," he replied. Sharply, "I didn't ask for any of this." Riven stopped a few feet away, tilting her head slightly. "You're right," she said softly. "But here you are." The force fields dropped without a sound, and Kale lowered his fists slightly. "I want answers," he said, his voice firm. "Why am I really here, Riven? Why are you alone on this deck? Why are you keeping me here?" She looked at him for a long moment, the playful look gone. Then she motioned for him to follow her. He hesitated, then walked behind her, limping, tired, but alert. They returned to her cabin, or what he now realized was something more than just living quarters. The room had screens, strange devices, and several sealed lockers. She tapped a glowing console, and the lights dimmed to a warm hue. "This ship isn't what it used to be," she said finally. "I'm the only one left in this section. Everyone else is in deep cryo or gone." "What happened?" Kale asked, watching her closely. "There was a mission," she said, eyes flickering. "Something went wrong, something we weren't supposed to find." She didn't say more, and he didn't proceed. Instead, he looked at the food tray. Still on the table, untouched, cold. His stomach growled, and she raised an eyebrow. "Hungry?" she asked, already walking toward another panel. "I didn't poison the last batch." "If that's what you were wondering, I still don't trust you," he said. But he sat down slowly. "Good," she replied. "I told you not to." As he ate quietly, she stood by the door, arms folded. "You humans are curious creatures," she said, "always trying to fix things, even when you don't understand them." "Better than doing nothing," he mumbled through a bite. She walked toward him again, slower this time, her expression unreadable. "I was given orders when I found you," she said. "Strict ones: study, report, observe." He looked up sharply. "So you are spying on me?" "Yes," she said, not denying it, "but I haven't sent a single report yet." "Why not?" he asked, surprised. She leaned close, eyes narrowing slightly. "Because something about you doesn't match what they told me." He set the tray down and stood up, ignoring the pain in his leg. "What did they say about humans?" he asked. "That you're impulsive, violent, weak," she said. "But you didn't fight me when you woke up. You didn't scream or beg. You waited, watched, Then tried to escape smartly. Kale met her eyes. Maybe they didn't send the right files. She laughed softly. Just once, maybe, she said, stepping back. Or maybe you're just the wrong kind of human. He stared at her, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Then she said something that sent a chill through his spine. They'll be coming soon. She said, her voice low. The others, the ones who gave the orders. Why does that sound like bad news? He asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the door again, turned back to him, and gave a strange half-smile. Because when they come, she said, you'll wish it was just me keeping you here. The door closed behind her again. And for the first time since waking on this alien ship, Kale realized he might not have been rescued. He might have been captured, and worse. He might be the only one who didn't know why. The alarm didn't sound like danger, it sounded like a heartbeat. Slow, deep, steady, echoing through the walls like something alive. Kale opened his eyes, sitting up quickly, but the room was empty. No ribbon, no food tray, no light, just shadows. And the sound pulsing in time with his breath. He stood up, dizzy, and moved toward the wall. The panels that once glowed were now dark. The door didn't open, no matter how many times he pressed his hand against it. The silence around him felt heavier than noise. A screen blinked on suddenly behind him. Bright green words floated on. A black screen evaluation beginning phase 1. His heart raced. What the hell? He whispered, backing away. Another screen lit up. This one showed his heartbeat, body temperature, and even brainwaves. Then a new line appeared. Subject A109 human under observation monitor. Active. Kale turned in a full circle. Realizing something chilling. He was never alone in this room, not really. Someone, somewhere, had been watching him from the start. A voice crackled through the room-knot ribbons. It was colder, artificial, without emotion. Respond to the following instructions to avoid disciplinary measures before he could. Shout in protest. The wall opened, revealing a long corridor filled with red lights and moving platforms. Begin sequence, the voice said. He hesitated, then stepped forward. The floor moved under him like a treadmill. Shifting and changing speeds, he had to adjust quickly. His injured leg trembling from the effort every few feet, strange, mechanical. Arms came out of the walls, not attacking but testing. One scanned his temperature, another measured his reflexes by throwing a small object at him. He caught it without thinking. The platform sped up. His breathing grew harder. At the far end of the hallway, he saw another screen flash. Cognitive checkpoint. Solve to proceed. A box popped up in front of him with symbols he didn't recognize. He touched one, and it shocked his hand lightly. Wrong answer. He squinted, thinking quickly, then touched another. The door opened, he stepped through, panting, and stumbled. Into another chamber. This time, Riven stood there, arms crossed, watching silently. He didn't speak, just glared at her, angry and confused. What the hell was that? He finally snapped a test. She said simply, "For what?" "To see if you're worth keeping," she replied, her face unreadable. He stared at her, unable to tell if she was serious. "You're joking," he said. She walked toward him slowly. "No," she said. "You are not here by accident, Kale. This ship has a purpose, and now, so do you." He took a step back. "I didn't sign up for any of this. You didn't have to," she said. "You were chosen." His blood turned cold. "By who?" She looked away for the first time, unsure. "There's a council," she said. "They want to see how far you humans can go, how far you can be pushed." Kale clenched his fists. "So I'm just a lab rat to them, you were supposed to be," she said softly. "But I delayed the next phase." He narrowed his eyes. "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a small black cube. It floated in her hand, glowing softly. She tapped it. and it projected a memory of video of him inside his pod, unconscious, dying, they said. To let you fade, she said, but I didn't. He looked at the image, then at her. You're not following your orders. I'm starting to question them, she said. You're not like the others we studied. He frowned. How? Many humans have you. Tested? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Enough, she said. None made it past phase 2. He took a step closer. What's in phase 2? She looked up at him, her silver eyes colder now. Pain, she said, and truth, a silence. Passed between them, heavy and strange. Then the door behind her slid open with a hiss. A deep voice echoed from the corridor. Navigator, Riven. Prepared the subject for next sequence. She didn't move, just looked at Kale. Her eyes, no longer teasing, no longer calm. Now they looked afraid. You still want to know the truth? She asked quietly. He nodded once. I'm not running this time. Good, she said. Because after this next part, there won't be anywhere left to run. The door closed behind them as they walked into the dark, and somewhere deep in the ship a new test was beginning, one that neither of them could control. Asterisk sparks danced in the air as the chamber lights flickered. Kale threw himself forward, landing hard on his shoulder. The heat from the reactor conduit behind him made the air shimmer. A pipe burst, spraying steam that burned across his arm. He didn't stop. He kept moving. Dragging the heavy tool toward the control panel, Riven's voice crackled through the speaker, tight with panic. Human, you have to stabilize the pressure now. I'm trying, he shouted back, slamming the tool into place. The ship groaned around him like a wounded beast. Red warning lights blinked everywhere, alarms screaming in alien code. The readings spiked one wrong move, and the power core would melt through the deck. Kale jammed the override switch, held it down with both hands. Then silence. The lights steadied, the alarms faded, and the pulse of the reactor slowed. He fell backward, coughing, sweat pouring down his neck. A door slid open across the room. Riven stood there, her face pale, her chest rising and falling. Fast, you could have died, she said softly, stepping toward him. You weren't supposed to go down there alone. No one else was going to, he said, trying to stand. She grabbed his arm, helping him up without a word. She didn't let go right away. You saved the ship, she whispered. You saved me. Kale looked at her, his voice hoarse. I didn't do it for you, he said. Maybe not at first, she replied. Her grip tightening just a little. But you stayed, and that means something. For a moment, there was quiet between them. Not silence, just quiet. Then Riven turned her head away, eyes flicking toward a ceiling camera. I have to show you something, she said, voice lower now. But if I do, there's no turning back. Show me, he said. Without hesitation, they walked through an access tunnel, dimly lit and narrow. Riven didn't speak as she tapped a hidden panel in the wall. A section slid open, revealing a room unlike any Kale had seen before. It was filled with glass tanks each, one holding a body, human bodies suspended in pale blue liquid. Their eyes closed, some were male, some female. Some looked barely adults. All had scars, all had numbers tattooed on their necks. Kale stumbled back, horror in his eyes. What? What is this? The others, she said quietly. The ones who failed. You said there were tests, Kale whispered. You never said people died. They weren't supposed to, she said. But the council doesn't care what happens to humans out here. You're useful until you're not. Kale shook his head, fury and sickness fighting in his gut. I'm not going to be part of this. You already are, she said, walking to the nearest tank. I used to think this was normal. I followed orders, watched them suffer until I stopped feeling anything. He watched her place a hand on the glass, her expression softer than he'd ever seen. What changed? He asked. You, she said, looking at him again. You didn't scream, or cry, or beg. Like the others, you kept thinking, kept fighting, even when it made no sense. Cale didn't know what to say. He looked at the tank again, the number branded into the boy's skin. A 108. He was a 109. I'm next, Cale said, his voice cold. Or I was. Not anymore, Riven replied. I've stopped sending reports. I've blocked the surveillance. They think you're unstable, so they delayed Phase 2. He looked at her sharply. You risked everything. I didn't plan to, she said, stepping closer to him. But now I can't stop. Because you're not like the others, Cale. You're different than they expected. He stepped forward, inches from her now. Her eyes weren't glowing anymore. They looked tired, uncertain, almost human. Then, help me get out, he said. Help me end this. She didn't answer for a moment. Then she reached into her uniform and pulled out a thin metal chip. This is a command bypass, she said. If you plug it into the central core, you'll unlock the ship's locked decks. And then what? He asked. Then we run, she whispered. Or we fight. Either way, we do it together. Cale took the chip and stared at it. It was small, cold, and heavier than it looked. Just like the truth she had shown him behind them, one of the tanks released a long, bubbling sigh, as if something inside had just stirred. Neither of them noticed. They were already walking into the dark again. This time, side by side, two fugitives trapped inside a machine built for silence and secrets. But now, the silence had been broken, and the secrets were running out of places to hide. The screen blinked awake on its own. Cale was sleeping in the corner of Riven's quarters, curled up near the wall with a thin blanket over him. He didn't hear the soft tone, but Riven did. She stood still in front of the terminal, her eyes fixed on the message glowing in red. Directive confirmed. Subject A109 to be terminated no later than 1 cycle. Her lips didn't move, but her hands curled into fists. No warning, no discussion, just a cold sentence on a glowing screen. The council had finally decided. Cale was no longer a subject. They had judged him as a threat. She didn't wake him, not yet. Instead, she walked to her private locker and opened the hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a small bag, barely the size of a hand. She pulled it out, checked the contents quickly. 2 forged IDs, a power cell, a navigation chip, and a stun blade with its charge at full. She stared at it all for a moment. Her past told her to follow orders, to finish what the council had begun. But something had shifted inside her. Cale had changed things. She walked over to him quietly and sat beside him. He stirred, then opened his eyes. Blinking against the low light. You're up early, he mumbled, still half asleep. We have to go, she said softly. Now he sat up quickly, alert. What happened? They sent the order, she said, her voice calm but hard underneath. They want you dead by nightfall. His jaw tightened. So much for being useful, he muttered. She handed him the small bag. There's an escape pod to decks. Down, unused, and off the grid, she said. We go now, or we don't go at all. He stared at her, surprised. You're coming with me? I don't know how much longer I can hold off the overrides, she said, not answering the question directly. If I stay behind, they'll erase everything including me. He nodded once. No hesitation this time. Then let's go. They slipped out of her cabin, walking fast but careful. She moved like a shadow, silent and smooth. Cale followed, his steps less graceful but steady. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. The ship was darker than usual. The lights flickering faintly overhead. Security droids passed them without reacting. Riven had looped the internal scans. But the deeper they went, the more unstable everything felt. The ship groaned, like it sensed betrayal. Why did you do this? Cale asked, as they waited for a corridor to clear. Why risk your position? She didn't look at him as she answered, "Because I believed the lies they told me. And you made me see through them." They moved again. Passing a junction filled with strange fog coolant leaking from somewhere above, Riven tapped a wall panel, revealing a narrow service ladder behind it. "This leads to the launch bay," she said. "No cameras down there." He followed her down the ladder, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, the launch bay stretched. Out in eerie silence, a single pod sat in the shadows, sleek, small, and barely armed. "Can it outrun a cruiser?" Cale asked, scanning the room. "No," she said, "but it can disappear." They hurried toward it, but before they reached the ramp, a voice echoed through the bay. "I knew it." They spun around. A tall alien officer stood near the entrance. His armor black and sharp, his eyes glowing red. "Riven," he said coldly. "Do you really think you can run with a failed experiment?" She stepped forward, placing herself between Cale and the officer. "He's not a failure," she said. "He's proof we were wrong." The officer raised a hand, and Cale saw the weapon built into his gauntlet. "Charge up. You've made your choice then," he said. Cale lunged first not to attack, but to throw the bag into the pod's open hatch. Riven moved faster than Cale had ever seen. Her stun blade flashing through the air, it crackled against the officer's armor, buying them only seconds. "Get in," she shouted. Cale climbed inside the pod, slamming controls as she jumped in behind him. The pod shook violently as the hangar doors opened, alarms blaring. The officer's shot missed by inches as they launched into the void. Cale gripped the console, steering as stars stretched in front of them. "Coordinates?" he asked. She slid the nav chip into the board. "Somewhere they'll never look," she said, breathless. They didn't speak for a long time, just watched the stars fly past. Two fugitives now, truly alone, finally. Cale broke the silence. "You said we're running out of time." She looked at him with something like a smile. "We are," she said. "But now, it's our time." The stolen pod drifted in a silent pocket of space, hidden behind a broken moon. Its lights were dimmed, its engines cold. Inside, Cale stared out the small window, watching pieces of rock spin slowly past. His hands were still trembling, even though it had been hours since they escaped. Behind him, Riven sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, her back against the wall. She hadn't spoken much since they launched. Something in her had changed. Cale wasn't sure if it was fear, guilt, or something else entirely. He turned around and finally asked, "What happens now?" She opened her eyes slowly. Her voice was soft, tired. "We wait. We're blind out here until I finish rewiring the sensors." Cale sat down across from her. He noticed the way she kept touching the edge of her sleeve, over and over. "A nervous habit. Maybe you don't seem like the same person who locked me in a room," he said. She gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not," she replied. "You were my responsibility, my assignment. But now, you're my mistake." Cale frowned. "Mistake?" "I let my feelings override orders," she said. "I'm a decorated navigator. I don't run from commands. I carry them out." "But you didn't," Cale said, "and I'm still alive." She looked up at him, really looked at him this time. "No," she said. "You're more than just alive. You're free now." Cale leaned back, his voice low. "Then why do I still feel like a prisoner?" Her fingers stopped moving. He had touched something deep. Something she didn't expect him to say. "I've been on ships my whole life," she whispered, "following paths, obeying codes, listening to voices I never met. I thought I was free because I could fly anywhere, but I was caged by every order I followed." He didn't say anything. He just let the silence carry the weight of her words. She stood slowly and walked to the hatch, looking out into the dark. "Cale," she said after a while, "there's a place far from here, an old supply station used by smugglers. No scanners, no questions, just shadows and trade. You think they'll help us? He asked. I think they'll take credits, and I have some. She replied. It's not safety. But it's time. He nodded. Then let's go, as she worked on the navigation system. Cale moved toward the storage bay. He found some old emergency gear, spare food packs, and a long gray coat that almost fit him. As he was checking a power cell, he noticed a blinking light. A small tracker built into the wall, hidden, still active. Riven, he called out. Holding it up, she turned, and for a second, her face went pale. They placed it during the inspection phase. She said, I thought I disabled all of them. You missed one, Cale said quietly. And if it's still pinging, someone's coming. She grabbed the device and crushed it in her hand, then looked at him with urgency in her eyes. We have to leave now, the pod roared to life. Breaking its silence for the first time in hours, they launched forward, away from the moon, deeper into unknown space. The station wasn't on any map Cale had seen. But Riven guided them through asteroid fields and signal dead zones like she knew every hidden path by memory. Finally, they saw it a dark, massive shape floating in blackness, rusty, silent, with only a single flickering beacon. They docked. Quietly, the pod sealing into a forgotten bay filled with dust and darkness. Cale stepped out first, feeling the cold metal under his boots. Riven followed, her hand resting on the stun blade hidden at her side. The station smelled like oil and old air. But it was empty for now, as they moved deeper into the corridors. Cale spoke again. Back on the ship, he said. You said I was a test. Do you still think that's all I was? Riven stopped walking. She turned toward him, the shadows hiding half her face. No, she said. You were never. Just a test, even if I wanted you to be. Cale stepped closer. Then what am I now? She didn't look away. You're the only person I've ever disobeyed for. She said, you're not my prisoner anymore. Cale, you're the only one I'd run with. A low hum echoed through the corridor's suddenly movement. Riven pulled him behind a crate, whispering, they're here. Cale's heart pounded again. But it wasn't fear this time. It was something sharper readiness. He looked at her, and in that moment, he knew one thing clearly. He wasn't alone anymore. The station lights went out without a sound. 1 second. Cale and Riven were crouched behind a broken wall. The next, pure darkness. Not even the emergency lights came on. Only the quiet hum of footsteps echoed through the metal hallways, slow and certain. Riven didn't speak, but Cale could feel her breath near his cheek. Steady and close. She wasn't scared, not like before. She was ready. A voice cut through the black. Smooth and cruel. Navigator Riven. Your rebellion ends here. It was him, the same officer from the hangar bay. He was here, and he hadn't come alone. Riven leaned in close, whispering just enough for Cale to hear. There's only one way out, and it's not behind us. She pulled something small from her belt, a data chip, glowing faintly with internal light. This has the evidence, she said. Everything they did to your people. Every lie, every test. Cale took it without question, sliding it into a hidden pocket inside his jacket. Why give it to me? He asked. She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing just enough to see. Because, if I don't make it, someone has to tell the truth. The footsteps were getting closer, heavy boots echoing like drum beats. Cale reached for the weapon they had taken from the pod. It wasn't much, but it would buy time. Then the hallway burst into light flash bombs. Dropped by the soldiers, lit the station like lightning. Cale covered his eyes as Riven jumped forward, fast as light blade in hand. The first enemy never saw her coming. He fell without a sound. Cale ducked behind a steel crate and fired twice. He didn't miss. His shots echoed like thunder in the station's empty bones. But there were too many of them, more than they'd seen, too fast, too prepared. Kale was knocked back by a stun blast. Pain jolting through his ribs, he hit the ground hard, gasping. When his vision cleared, Riven stood over him, cut, bleeding but still fighting. She grabbed his arm, pulling him up with strength he didn't think she still had. They ran together, dodging through ruined corridors and past broken doors. The station was crumbling around them, but she never stopped. Finally, they reached a launch, shaft-hold, unused but still functional. One emergency pod remained. Half buried in dust, Riven pushed him toward it. "Get in," she said, breath sharp. "And Lo, what about you?" he asked, chest heaving. "You're coming with me." "I'll follow," she said. "I just need to trigger the collapse sequence manually." Kale hesitated. "No, we go together, or not at all." For a second, she looked ready to argue. But then her eyes softened, and she did something she'd never done before. She placed her hand gently on his face and leaned forward. Her lips brushed his light, quick and real. "I told you." She whispered, "You're not my prisoner." "Anymore?" She turned and ran back into the shadows. Kale stood frozen, heart hammering. Then the countdown began her doing. No doubt he had no choice. He climbed into the pod and sealed it. It launched with a scream of old metal, flying into space just as the station began to break apart. He watched from the viewport as flames spread through the decks. Then, in the chaos, he saw another pod burst free just behind his. It spun, off balance, but still moving. He let out a shaky breath. She made it. The two pods floated through space, side by side, silent and scarred. They drifted far from scanners, far from wars, far from orders. Just two souls running on the edge of stars. Later, when the danger had passed and their pods were linked again, Riven opened the hatch, bruised and tired, but alive. Kale didn't say a word. He just pulled her into the tightest hug he'd ever given anyone. She melted into it without resistance. They didn't need promises or speeches, just that one moment, full of quiet and trust and truth. Far away, the stolen data chip now rested. In Kale's hand, the truth was safe, and one day they'd make the galaxy hear it. But for now, they had no mission, no council, no rules, just the hum of space around them, and the quiet bond that no one could break. Riven leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered the first words that didn't sound like a smirk. "It's just the two of us now." Kale smiled. "And that's enough."